Okay, so welcome to our last video, and this is Dr. Ramlow for one more time. We're going to talk about writing technical reports, not quite like what you may have done if you took technical report writing, but we're going to talk more about the structure, how to make it look professional, and basically combine all of the things that we've learned in the first 6 sessions, right, into our project. So here's a little bit of an overview. Regardless of your major, you'll have to write reports, right? So the questions are, how do you structure a technical report, right? What are the right contents to have? The right sections, the right headers, right? Like headings for that we've been doing in our first couple of labs, right? How do you present data and their analyses and what goes into a conclusion? In other words, right, how do you cite evidence within a conclusion? So we're going to use Microsoft Word to create a professional report. So that's the text part, including headers, headings, inserted symbols and equations, right? There's not going to be spelling or grammatical errors. Then we're going to use our data analysis tools that we've used in Microsoft Excel to present measured and tabulated data as tables and graphs, make it look professional, right? Which is basically what we've been doing. When we write, we're not going to use first person. We're not going to use I and we, right? And we have to be careful about the tense depending on what section of the report we're in. Sometimes we write in present tense and sometimes we write in past tense. So for instance, if we're doing the theory or background section, the whole thing is in past tense unless you're reflecting about how it connects to the current study or experiment. And then we're going to talk finally how to best distribute a final technical report, whether you're doing that right in a class or you're doing that out in business and industry. So here are our typical key sections of a technical report. We usually have a cover page and a title or a title page of some kind. Sometimes in industry, I usually had some kind of internal memo that summarized, and always summarize the conclusions because that's what the head of R&D wanted. But but especially for a class, your cover page and title page will be pretty basic. Um, Usually have something about the objective of your experiment or study or project. You have a theory section or background. So this is the stuff that's been before. It's kind of the theoretical framework for this particular project, study, experiment. Then there's a set of procedures that are detailed enough that somebody could duplicate or replicate your study or project and come up with the same measurements. And then we talk about results, right? That's where you present the data, maybe show some sample calculations, and then finally there's a conclusion. And if you wanted to look at some places where these things are discussed, the OWL at Purdue is a good one, and then I also found this PDF, which is pretty decent summary of contents of a technical report. And I think this is, well, you can access it through the PDF of the PowerPoint slides. So we're going to start off talking about the cover page and objectives, right? These are usually pretty short, so they get one PowerPoint slide. So the cover page, especially in a college report, right, would have your title, the title of it, of your experiment, your study, your project, your full name, the date of the report, and then other pertinent information. So if it's for a course, it would have the course title, maybe the instructor. If it was for an organization that you work for, right, the company, your department, and then we have our objectives, which is a separate, right, after the cover page is one page. The objectives are the beginning of the body of the report. Typically, the objectives are just one or two sentences, and it basically introduces the study by stating its purpose or the objectives, some instructors or organizations may want you to have an abstract instead. Abstracts are longer. They usually have anywhere from 150 to 300 words maximum, and they usually break down, right, kind of like the sections of your report in a summary with a little bit more focus on the conclusions. Possible objectives would be, right, the purpose of this study is to evaluate this new cutting tool, right, or to verify Young's, right, equation, not to prove, because Young had to do years of experiments and fill many notebooks to prove anything. The objective of this study is to measure different wavelengths of light using Young's equation, right? Maybe to compare. You don't want to say things that are kind of non-engineering objectives, like the objective of this lab is not to teach us, right? That's not the objective, nor is it to show the student. So those are just things that I've seen that you don't want to use that. That's not a professional objective. Right? And the objective section is written in the present tense, right? So the purpose of this study is to evaluate, blah, blah, blah. Then we have the theory section. Sometimes this is referred to as the background. It's in a paragraph form. It provides the theoretical background or framework for the study. It describes how this study fits into the overall scope of the topic. So if it was Young's equation, you would talk about the background of that, about interference, right? And those kinds of details that fit into kind of setting the stage for the physics experiment. It typically includes scientific and engineering principles, laws, equations. This is where you introduce equations that you used, right? Every time you use an equation, you then define all the symbols immediately afterwards, right? This is where you have maybe some diagrams and some figures, right? Right. If you're verifying Young's equation, then you would have the experimental setup would be actually in the theory section. And you often have citations in the theory section because you are referring to, right, other work, right? So this could be a physics book, right, your mechanical design book, lots of other things. When you talk about the equations, you would not do it this way or this way, right? You would use the equation editor and make it look basically like it would in a textbook. It's kind of how I usually describe it. And here's an example of introducing a formula and then explaining what each of these variables stands for. Notice that, right, my equation is numbered as well, and we usually do that. Word gives us a way to number equations, not often quite like this, but we still number them. Graphs are most typically going to be XY scatter graphs because we're not going to have categorical data on the x-axis. We're going to have numbers on the x and y, right? We know at this point we're not going to be handwriting symbols or equations into a report. That's not professional, right? So here's a little side note on numbering equations, tables, and figures, right? So we've looked at references on our ribbon before in Microsoft Word, and we've used, right, insert footnote. Well, we can also insert figures, equation, and tables, and Word will automatically number them for us, and they will make it so that we could create a table of figures and a table of equations and a table of whatever I missed, table of tables. So here I can go into documents, right, and say that I'm going to have a figure here. I'll go into Excel. I'm going to steal something out of my software applications Excel folder or file that I've been using all along. Oh, here's this one. It's already highlighted. So, right, instead of doing it this way, I'm just going to highlight this. go into my document. I'm going to paste it. Not that way. I'm going to use this so it looks nice. And now I'm going to have a table number. I'm going to slide this over. So I can go to references on my ribbon, and here I have, right, insert caption. Right, so I can label picture or an object, right? Equations, all kinds of things. So this isn't a figure, this is a table. So I'm going to come over here. So there's my three options. So there's my table, right? And I can click on OK. I can have it number different ways as well, right? So there's table 1. Has a kind of a weird default in this case. I don't know why it made it so small. So I'm going to make it 12-point font, right? And I don't remember what I called this, right? This was table 1, right? Radii and density. And then I could create another, I could put in another table. I'm just making stuff up now. Oops, didn't want to do that. Right, so say I'm going to insert another table. So I'm just going to go into my software applications. I have so many tables. Here, what's this one? Oh, I don't want that one. Oh. No, I didn't make these pretty yet. Look at all these things that we've done. Oh, it's a pretty hideous table. All right, I'm gonna get rid of, I don't like these, so I can't help myself. I have to make tables look nice because I have to. Because I yell at graduate students and undergrads about this, so not even in this can I. So I'm going to get rid of these. I'm going to get rid of the outside one. So it looks a little more professional. I'm going to make my row height a little bigger. Oh, it doesn't have a default. That's really weird. Oh, let's try 12. Oh, nope, that wasn't right. Let's make it 20. That looks a little better. All right, so, whoa. Oh, because I hit that weird little. So now I'm going to highlight my table, right, hit Control Copy, go into my document, going to paste it, keep my format. I could have made it a little wider, but that's all right. I'm going to come in here. Going to make my second table. So I'm going to go to references on my ribbon, insert caption. Oops. Oh, not that one. Oop, insert, not citation, caption. Click OK. I got to change the default in here somewhere. Make it so it's not an obnoxious size. Going to make it so that it's here. Right, and I could call this Young's equation data. And so there are my two tables, right? I fixed things, but now I can go to references, right? And I can insert table of figures, but don't panic. I can come in here and I am inserting a table of tables, and it tells me that it's going to be tables because it knows I don't have any figures. I can pick some different formats, but I'm going to like pick this one, click OK. There's my table. Probably want to have a section on here. So I could come in here and call it table of tables. I could make this a heading because maybe I want to have it in my table of contents later. Right, so go to home, and I'm going to go to my heading. And there it is. And if so this is not continued, so sometimes you have to play around. So now it's down on the second page, right? But it doesn't reflect this. So I can come over here, I can right click and say update field. Say page numbers only because I haven't changed anything else. And now it automatically tells me that my second table is actually on page 2. So like I said, we're going to make it so we're going to be very impressive in making our technical reports. The next section is the procedures. This is in paragraph form. This is not step 1, step 2. It's not a bulleted list. It's not a numbered list, right? If you made procedures for, right, a factory worker to make something or measure something, you would do it that way so that they could check off, right, along the procedures. When I worked in industry, I made procedures for technical reports, and they were in paragraph form, and I made procedures for, right, our hourly workers, and they were in a numbered list, right? And sometimes I made it so they could check things off, depending on the worker especially. Right? This is literally where we write about what was done and how it was accomplished. And you do it in the order that the procedure was run, but not step 1, step 2. So you can literally imagine performing the experiment and describe what you did and what happened, right? You can describe, this is where you describe the experimental apparatus. A lot of times you're expected to include the manufacturer and model numbers for equipment used, right? You might include a diagram and sketch or a photograph here, right? For our technical reports, for our little project, you are going to have to include in your procedure a picture of you, right, recording or measuring the data, right? So, and everybody does their own thing. So nobody has the same data, nobody has the same, right? Everybody does something different. Right? This section should be complete enough for someone to duplicate the results of your efforts, right? So in research, we call this replicability, right? So they can replicate your study and come up with, right, the same answers. This is how we can tell actually when people fake data. This is how, right, when I know somebody who faked their master's data. And this is how they figured it out, because when they followed his procedure, they didn't get the same results. We write the procedure section in the past tense since the experiment has already been done. So theory section past tense, procedures in past tense. And then we talk about the results. This is also in paragraph form, right? We present the results in multiple ways. So we have words, we have tables of data, we have graphs, and we might have figures, right? So we might have pictures of, right, some experimental error or something. Okay. And here's just an example. Right? Notice that the axes aren't labeled, and that bothers me, but hey, it was something I could just grab. So all data should have appropriate units throughout the results section. Data sets should be in tables, right? Just like we've been making tables. Graphs are most probably XY scatter graphs. You'll probably have some kind of fit to your data, so you'd have markers and then it's some kind of trend line, probably. If you have calculations, you want to include not the equations, but sample calculations, right? So you would actually show, right, the solution of things you calculated using insert equation, not written in by hand, where you put in the calculation. So you'd have the values with units, right, and the answer. And you would do that, so say we'll use the Young's equation example. You would have an example of the calculation of wavelength, and then you would have an example calculation of calculating the percent error. Right? That's where you would be, that percent error would be comparing your results to theory, right? And when we talk about that, we most often mean that you calculate percent error. right? Theoretical versus measured. Right? And the results section now is not in the past tense, but it's in the present tense, right? And then finally, it's the conclusions of a report. This is also in paragraph form. It's also in present tense. And this is where you discuss your results. You do not say things like, I really enjoyed this project. It was a lot of fun and I learned a lot. That is not discussing your results, right? Discussing your results means that you think about the purpose of this study, right? And relative to that, you say whether or not the project or lab or experiment met those objectives. Then, right, you can conclude something from the lab. You did not prove anything again, right, but you might have demonstrated, verified, right? You want to restate and interpret the major results, and you need to cite evidence when you talk about whether the objectives were accomplished and talking about the results. That means that you cite the evidence. So you use the numerical values, right? You talk about the trend lines, you talk about, right, the linear fit to your data and give the slope of the line, give the variance accounted for, right? So you don't just go say something like, and this was verified by the results in table 1. You need to show that, right, by possibly providing some examples, talking about if you did percent errors, what the range of percent errors are, maybe discuss that you see some kind of trends in your data. For the second experiment that you ran in Young's equation lab, you noticed that your results were better, right? Maybe there were reasons for that. Maybe you noticed that, right, when you had a bigger L, right, you had better data, anything like that. Those are the things that you talk about in your conclusions, and this is where you talk about reasons for error involved in your procedures, your data collection, and the equipment. And there are some things posted up in our section on technical reports about what kinds of things would make a good reason for error. So not human error, right? Not we might have measured wrong, we might have calculated wrong, but really thinking about calibration of equipment, parallax error, right? The fact that you measured something, you could have used a more precise tool, right? That you assumed something was perpendicular, but you didn't measure it, right? Things like that. And then finally, you should list all of your references used, right? You cite within the text, and you cite within the text if you borrowed figures or tables. If you were publishing, you would actually need permission to use somebody else's table or figures. We're not doing that, so you're not going to have to do that. You want to use proper citation format. For our project, I'm not really picky about what type of citation formatting you use. I usually use APA because my publications are more typically in journals that are education journals or actually, believe it or not, caregiving of aging adults. And again, the Purdue Online Writing Lab gives you some really good examples of these kinds of things. Right? And then some final words, right? You want to make sure that you do spell and grammar check, that you have numbered pages, that the date of the report's in your footer, and it should also be in the title. A lot of times we shorten, right? We have what we call a running header, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And then, right, we want to have text below in figures. We want to have tables, right? We want to have some kind of standard font. So Times New Roman font at 12 point is pretty much a standard. Double space is also typically a standard. And when you distribute things, you want to distribute them as a PDF. So I'm going to show you how to do a couple more of these kinds of things. So here's our table of tables. Right now I'm just going to create a cover page. Right? So I can come in and just insert a page break. And I can call this my cover page. Right, so I'm going to call it something. I'm going to make it, whoops, no, I don't want to do that. All right, so I'm going to call it something really fascinating. Experiment 1. Right. I'll put in today's date. Right. Applications, Dr. Ramlow. And right now I'm going to, come down. And here is the beginning of my actual report, right? So I'm just gonna, so I'm gonna have my objective here. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot I have my table of tables. I'm gonna have that be a separate page. All right. So I'm gonna come in here. And I'm gonna have my objectives. I'm going to have my theory section. I'm going to have my procedures. There's my results. This is where my table of data is going to be. After my results, that's a really long table. I'm going to have conclusions. And then I'm going to have my references. And now I'm going to highlight each of these. All right, I'm going to make them my headers. So this is a little bit like what we did in Lab 2. Right, and we can see them appearing over here in my navigation pane, which I almost always have on just because it's helpful, and most of the things I write are pretty long. So there's each of my sections. I can insert a figure. Right, so I'm going to come over here. Do I have any other figures? Oh, here. I'll take this one. I'm going to get rid of the figure 2. Well, I'm not going to worry about it right now. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it in my document. I know. I don't want to link my data. Oh, there it is. Figures usually are named underneath. So I'm going to come over to references, insert caption, and now I'm going to insert a figure. It's going to be figure 1. And I'm going to call it something, I'll do it something like that, line graph of Young's equation data. And I could insert more, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So here I have all my stuff, right? And I'm actually going to put headers and some other things in here, right? So this is my first page, so I can go to Insert, Header, and I usually do the blank one because I'm very unimaginative. And notice that one of the things I can have is different first page, right? So I'm going to do that. And down here, I'm going to have my running header. All right, I'm just going to call it Experiment 1. I'm going to make it, Let's make it go over here. And I'm going to insert my page numbers like I've been doing, right? So I'm going to put my name on my page. And then I'm going to have my page numbers. Insert, right, page number, right, my current position. We'll do something fancy. Oh, but this is page 2, right? And I don't want to have my cover page numbered, right? So how can I do that? I can do a couple of different things. I have to remember how to make it be a different section. Oh, have to remember. I do this all the time. Oh, maybe I should have done. So let's go to help. There we go. Insert a section break. Right? So here's what we need to do. So I want to add a section break. So in the layout in page setup, right, we're going to choose our break. So, all right, so we're going to come in here and we're going to go to page setup. Oh, where's page? So it must be in layout. Nope. There we go. And I'm going to have this be. So we can have a continuous, right? And we can have insert a section break and start the new section on the next page. Right? So that seems like something that I wanted to do over here. So I'm going to get rid of my well, that's not going to work well. All right, so I'm going to put in my break. Yep. Insert a section break and start a new section. All right, that worked out okay. And now if I go down, right, oh, I lost all my page numbers. Oh, because, oh, I'm going to have to redo my page numbers. So now this is no longer the first page, right? So I can come back down here. I have to go back to insert my header and footer. I'm not going to have a different first page. So now it went to that. It made this page 2. So I'm going to have to come over here, right click it, update my field, see if that fixes it. Nope. So I can come in here, whoops, right click on my 2. I'm going to edit my field. Oh, I could have different kinds of page numbers. Forgot to mention that. That's not what I wanted to do, right? So I'm going to start off with, see, and it tells me that I'm in section 2. No, that's not what I want to do. Here, let's try. It shouldn't have to do it this way, but page number, current position. Oh, it should be yeah, I do this all the time. It shouldn't do it. Should be a new section. La 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 la. I don't understand. Should make it. There we go. Needed to go. Not continue from previous section. We're going to start at 1. There we go. So there's my, and I got my running header. I got my page numbers that don't include my cover page. And now I'm going to get really fancy. I have my table of tables. Now I'm going to insert my table of figures, even though I only have one, just because I can. And this is my table of figures. Oops. And now I'm going to insert my table of contents. So go back to references, and over here I have table of contents. And I have a couple different ways to do that, right? I'm just going to take this one. It's really obnoxious. I'm going to call it table of contents. I can make it, right, different font because I want to, because their defaults are ugly. Right. If I change something, so for instance, my objectives go on the next page, then I can do like I did for the other one. I come in here and just right click and say update field, page numbers only, and then that automatically changes. And that's pretty much, right, what we need to know how to do. So go measure data and we'll see how everything turns out.